Hi everyone, you're with Rick and Maureen from Hunterline in Cambridge, Ontario. We're doing our 50-foot Queen Post covered bridge. We hope everybody that's participating is keeping up with the demand for the time that it takes. Today we want to get the roofing started. So one of the things a roof needs is sheathing. So our sheathing is just a strip of very, very thin basswood, and Maureen's going to show you exactly how to put that on.
Thanks, Rick. I put one side of the roof on already, just so you could see it's all set up, and I've started to trim some of the excess shakes that are overhanging the sheathing, and I'll show you how I did that in a little while. In the instructions it says to put the sheathing on both sides of the roof before you start the shakes, and I just decided because of the video to do one side of the roof, and it worked really well, so you could do it either way really. So you've already got your one side of the sheathing stained. That was to be done last week, so it's nice and dry. It's still a little bit warped, but it'll work itself out after we get it glued to these rafters. So what you need to do is just measure that sheathing. You want it to overhang the gable ends just ever so slightly, and a little bit overhang past the bottom of the rafters here. So just get a pen or a pencil and put the it's not even an eighth of an inch. It's just ever so slightly over the end of that gable, and put a little mark there. And I'm just going to measure in how far that is. Okay, and then on the other end, look at that. You can draw a line, or you can just use your sharp X-Acto knife to cut that, and that's what I'm going to do.
Don't do the fingers.
Yeah. Give it a couple of good slices, and then it usually breaks off pretty well. Okay, so we've got the width is done, and you want that to meet up with the other sheathing on the other side, just to make a little bit of a point, and then measure the width of it just beyond that rafter. And I'll just measure that.
One of the things you're trying to accomplish here is that the peak of the roof is pretty stable all the way across from one side to the other side. It'll come into play a little later when we put the ridge board on the end. You'll see when we get that far.
So just score that. Trouble with a plastic ruler is I usually take off a little bit of the plastic ruler. I think that's probably enough. It's pretty thin, so it breaks pretty easily for that little piece. So I would use the factory side of that sheathing to butt it up against that the top peak of the roof, and I think it's pretty good. I think I might still be a little bit long on the end.
Is that the stained side or the unstained
Yeah,
side?
this is the stained side, so that goes underneath when we glue it on. I'm just going to take a little bit off my end. It was a little bit wide or long. So that's better. And you can kind of tip it over and see how your edge is along the rafter. and it looks pretty good. So what you want to do, you're going to glue that sheathing to the roof with the stain side down. Okay, I've got one.
We stain the one side first because it's really hard to get your hand in there to stain the underside. So stain it before you put it on.
I've got one little part here on the eave part of this sheathing that's not quite straight. Not that it's going to matter too much because your shingles, or your shakes are going to overhang that. So what you want to do is get your glue. And put glue all along those rafters. You have to work kind of quickly because there's a lot of them. You just want to make sure that you've got all the surfaces covered so that sheathing will adhere to it really well. You might see that you've got a couple that are loose, so if you do, just go back and put a little glue on that underside where it attaches to the top sill of the wall.
That applicator is good for doing this, eh?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then take that sheathing and again take the manufactured length of that sheathing, whoops, stain side down, and attach it to the roof. And what you can do is I take a ruler or something that you can put across that sheathing, and a couple small clamps, and just clamp it at each end to kind of grab on here. So wherever you can find a spot to clamp that. Ever so carefully.
Just helps that it doesn't bubble up in the middle.
So that looks pretty good. And you need to just have a look at it, make sure that it looks like it's adhering and it looks good. So I would just let that set up, you know, good 10 minutes. But while you're waiting to do that, what you can do is get your shakes out and start popping all the shakes out.
So let's talk about our shakes. Our shakes are basswood shakes. Nobody around that I could find anywhere in the world made the shakes that we wanted. These are very prototypical. Some people say, oh, they're way too big. You got to remember, this is back in the 1800s. So I did some studying on how they made the shakes at that time. And usually what they did was just take a hunk of wood, and like a log, and put a wedge in it, and then whack it down. And whatever fell off, that's what the shake was. So they're all different thicknesses, they're all different lengths, and so on. So we wanted that very random look. And one of the ways, if I can show it here, one of the looks we were after was this look right here, where each layer shows. So you can see, like Maureen just popped those off. One of the neat things about these, that there's no waste, virtually no waste, because what you cut off one, you just use it for the next one.
Just take them off very carefully and don't damage the outside of the sprue of shakes, because you're going to use the thickest, the widest margin on the edge for your spacer on the roof. You need 4 of them for your roof. So just, you know, cut 4 of them off like that and set them aside, because you're going to put them down at the bottom of your roof.
We put those on the bottom. It's called a starter strip. That sets the angle of where the shakes are going to sit because of the overlap of each course going up the roof. So we first started just using one of them, and we thought, okay, after doing a few, that the first course still isn't on the right angle. So if you do 2 of them at the bottom, that sets the angle for the rest of the project.
So just clean up those shakes a little bit, take off the excess wood. You can tell what's not supposed to be there. I usually cut off all the little knobbies too where they're attached. I don't know that that's a big deal, but...
Now we notoriously do not use any laser cut products except for this. This is the only one that we have that's laser cut, and it's Imagine That Laser Art that does this for us.
And remember, don't stain your shakes before you put them on.
If you stain them first, they're going to warp all over the place. So as you can see of the side that's already done, they all lay very flat, and they're all glued on there very strongly, so that when we stain it afterwards, there's not much of a chance of warping. If one does warp, actually that looks good.
So you've got your 2 strips that you're going to use as your starter strip. You've taken the widest margins off of your shakes, and we're going to measure those. So you just want to measure along the bottom of your roof, one end to the other. Just get your pencil and mark it. If it's a little bit bigger, that's okay, you can trim it off later. So just cut that, and the other one, because you're going to do 2. And you're going to glue them together. So you want to get your glue again and just glue it right from one end to the other. And then get your other starter strip and put it on top of that one. Even it out. Fingers get a little bit full of glue doing this. So that's really tacky. It's going to set up nicely. And I think the sheathing hopefully is attached pretty well, and it looks good. So what you want to do is put this starter strip on. So just take your glue again right along the whole length of that sheathing, and take the starter strip, put it right to the edge, right to the bottom of that sheathing. It's overhanging a little bit on that end, at the gable ends, but that's okay because you're going to trim that with the excess shakes that you have later once it's all set up and dry. There, so you've got your starter strip on there. And now what you're going to do kind of, while we're waiting for that to dry, I'm going to get yourself a little lid or something that you can pour quite a bit of glue in, because this next part takes quite a bit of glue. So give yourself a good amount. Get yourself a cheap brush, usually a flat one is great, and you're going to want to put the glue on the roof so you can put your shakes on. And I usually just put enough for one course, so just...
If you don't know what a course means, that's one row all the way across. It's the same as bricks and just about anything in the building trades. It's called a course.
So right along your starter strip, and enough on the sheathing to attach those shakes.
What I was mentioning about to scale, the thickness of these is about, it can range from, maybe 1 3/4 to 2 inches thick. That's how big they were when they were made back in the 1800s. Everybody says, oh, they're supposed to be nice and even and really thin. That is a 20th century way of doing it, not a 19th century.
So
you
what,
see how quick they can go.
So what you want to make sure of is, I usually put the burnt side up so that you can see the varied colors in the shake. Just adds a little.
So that's an important point. Like we always do burnt side up, so that it just gives variances of colors.
I'm trying to get this first course on, and then I'm going to clamp it and let that set up before I start the rest of it. It's really important that you get that first course on there.
Now they should overhang enough that you can't see the starter strip. Mm-hmm. So that the shorter shake itself should not be under the starter strip. It should be up over it, just slightly.
So you can just turn it upside down and have a look and just make sure it's just extending over that starter strip. So you can see that they're starting to lift up, but once you get that first one down, it seems to go a lot better. So I'm just going to take my ruler, or if you've got a piece of metal or a metal ruler that's that long, it would be great too. And then just clamp it. I've got some nice little clamps here that work well. And
See, if you stain them ahead of time, the work would already be in it, and now you're fighting against the work. While when you do it this way, it doesn't get a chance to work.
And what you want to do too, just as a reminder, is when you're putting the shakes across, you're gonna vary where you put them. I'll show you that when we come back. But we're going to pause for a few minutes now to let this set up, and then we'll come back and continue on with the rest. Okay, so that has set up.
This is different when you can pause it.
Yeah.
Like when you're live, you don't have this capability.
So you want to start the next course. So you want to take your glue and put it right down to that the start of the tab on that shake that's already there, and a little bit onto your sheathing above. So go right along the whole width. I can see I didn't let it glue up well enough, but that's okay. It's pretty good. And when you put this next course on and all the way up, you need to stagger them so that your next course does not end on the same seam as the previous course, if that makes sense. So you can see my seam is here, there. I'm going to take my next course, my next shake, and put it spanning over that seam. And you want to bring the bottom of your shake right down to that tab. You can come right to the point where you see the cut ending, or you can leave a slight little space. I like to come right to the cut.
If you put them too close together, you're not going to have enough material to get to the top. And if you put them too far apart, it makes it look not the way it should look.
When you get to the each end at the width of it, just want to bring this down a little bit. You just take your shake and put it on, and just snap it. Snap it at the widest part, because you can always trim off any excess later.
That's why we say there's no waste with this system.
Yeah. So this end, always trying to keep that burnt side up.
Now the HO, the S, and the O scale standard gauge and narrow gauges are all using basswood for the shakes. Our N scale, we can't get basswood sheeting thin enough to for what we want for the prototype size of the thickness. So there we use a laminate. It's a birch laminate. It should all work out the same for staining and for gluing.
So just continue on with your shakes here, putting them on, each course the same as the last, just staggering them, and you'll know when you have to clamp again, because they won't be adhering. They'll be starting to lift up and warp a little bit. So then that's a good time to stop and get your ruler out or something else that you can put over top of them and clamp them. And I think maybe we'll stop there again for a little bit. I'm going to finish these courses right to the top to show you what we do at the very top. Okay, so we're back, and I've got my ruler across those courses that I put on, the shakes, and I've used these clamps. These clamps are great.
Needle nose clamps.
Yeah, they're quite long, and you can stick them right up under the roof rafters, and it holds it in place really well. So I just wanted to show you that. The part we're at now is we've got all the shakes right to the top. Okay, what we need to do is now place another course, but I have to trim it back a bit because it's going to be too long at the top. So I'm just going to take, I know that it's not very much to take off, just a little bit of a sliver. So you need to just kind of measure and trim off the excess. So you'll want to do that right across the board. Just a little bit. Get 3 of them here. And get your glue. Still not quite dry enough, but we're going to clamp it again.
You can see by using the burnt side, you can see that there's already a color variation in each shake.
So take the ones that you've cut, lay them next. If you have any glue oozing out, you can just go back with your tweezers and get it off. So that's kind of butting up against the other side of the roof. This one's a little bit long, so I'll have to trim that one off later. And you can see that there's still a lot of white space there. So you still have to put another row of shakes on there. because you're going to end up putting the ridge board on, and you want the tabs of the shakes to be sort of right in line with that ridge board. So just take a shake and kind of look as to how much you're going to cut off. And it's going to be very close to where the tab starts. So you want to do this very carefully. Take your X-Acto knife and just your metal ruler and cut just above where the tab starts. So you want to cut enough to go across that roof. I'm just going to show you where you would place it. I'm going to stagger this one a little bit. So it's like that. You can see that. So you can see at the top of the roof, there's enough room for that ridge board to go there. And that'll look really good. You can see that, kind of hard. Something like that. But we're going to pause again. I'm going to get those last two courses on where I have had to cut the width of them. Let it set up really well, and we'll come back and we'll put the ridge board on, and I'll show you how I trim off the excess shakes on the sides at the gable ends. Okay?
It's amazing how you can do 2 or 3 hours of work all in a fraction of a second through videos.
So we've got the shakes all set up here pretty well. You're going to find that you're going to need at least a couple hours for it to get to the point where you can start to file the peak in the roof and also cut off the excess shakes on either end of the gable. So this has been sitting for a couple hours now, and what you want to do is take your file and just file the top. You know, there's sometimes maybe a few cuts of your shakes that are kind of protruding up a little bit. You just kind of want to make it smooth all the way along. Both sides. Flip it over this side. You want to kind of go in the direction towards the peak, and you won't damage your shakes. You might still see a little bit of warping.
And that's okay.
But that's okay. You'll find that this is probably the trickiest part of the whole build, is getting this roof on there. The secret really is to find a way to clamp those shakes down until they set up. So that looks pretty good. And we want to cut off these shakes because they're protruding quite a bit. You can see they're past the sheathing. So usually I turn the bridge over, make sure you can see that. Get a really sharp X-Acto knife, put a little bit of pressure on your bridge, not too much, and just start cutting it away.
There's a lot of layers there, so you might have to
Yeah.
just work at it a little bit.
You just have to go easy. You just want to go a little bit beyond that sheathing.
Yeah, it's okay to stick out just a fraction of an inch.
So just work at it. I think when you're clamping that roof, if you've got something that's metal, like a thick ruler or a piece of metal that's the width of that roof, if you can lay it across and then clamp it down to the rafters carefully, it really helps. I used a ruler and clamped it, and that works pretty good. Okay, so this is almost off. There we go. So it's just, if you can see there, it's just, let me see that, just a little bit past that sheathing. And you can still work at that and trim it off a little bit if it's still protruding, and then just do the other end as well. And I think that's probably all we're going to have time for tonight. We'll have to put the ridge board on next week, so that's,
One of the big aspects here is to let all those shakes dry.
yeah, give it a good 24 hours, and then we can start. You can put the ridge board on, and that's where the ridge board is going to go, up at the top, and we'll maybe do that next video.
Okay.
So I think that's it.
Okay, this sounds good. We have one more session left to go.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, it's starting to look great, eh? Like, wow.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks. See you next week.